Move right to the Q&A. Anna, Guy, if you would join us, so we can maybe spend some minutes in the Q&A and then go into the networking part to leave some time for that as well. Let me maybe start with an easy question for you. We have heard about marketplaces, all these great services, but we've also heard about that we need to do more and that the customer is basically driving that. From your point of view, what are the key things that need to happen to move to a point where we have the majority of people in Finland, but also the world, take part in these circular retail, mobility as a service, or the examples of Bugaboo and all of these that you mentioned, Anna? What are the key criteria? What are the key things we need to put in place?
Well, that's actually a many-sided question and not an easy one to answer. So one could look at regulation, taxation, enablers. Then there's the businesses' willingness to open up. So our challenges is, first of all, we are in a way disruptors. So we are saying all of us need to work together. These companies used to work on their own, and we go and face them and say, listen, start working with us, but also with your competitors. That's really tough for them to hear. But when we explain it and they see the benefit, that's when they start to wake up, but it takes time. So we do need time, which means resources, which means funding, etc., to have the change happen. And transportation is really, rooted in its ways, and there's monopolies there, public transportation being a prime example. And they do see us as a threat before we explain to them that we actually will help them. And then there may be regulation protecting these silos that existed and were created 100 years ago to protect the environment, protect the citizens' interests, etc., etc. So we have to not only do lobbying, we have to do business-to-business transactions, but then also finally convincing consumers. And I think maybe that is, after all, the hardest one. Because as a consumer, you're an automaton. You just do what you used to do every day, right? So you used to drive your car, you will continue to drive your car. So actually making that change happen is quite difficult. So what's easy would be the question, and answer is nothing's easy, but that's, we are on a mission in a way, and that's what we want to do.
Thanks.
Okay, I think I really agree on this, and as most of you know that I'm a politician as well, so that I'm not sure if I'm the right person to say what should be done, but I really believe in structures and structural changes when it comes to the retail sector and their incentives. So I think something must be done there. And yes, I guess taxation and more liberal regulation, I think, are the most important drivers. But then when it comes to global megatrends, of course, AI is something that is very important as well. If I take a picture of that, we already have a technology in the world that recognizes this table, this brand, average price of this in second hand is something, so AI can do that, and we make it easy. So that's something that I think will change the dynamics of the industry.
Good, thanks.
Okay, that's a really actually difficult question. Because if you look at what research says, it actually mostly identifies barriers to this change. And actually what is identified that would be needed is what you said is actually regulation, taxations, because the problem is exactly what we have been talking here. Changing consumers' practices is really difficult. How we can do it is because I think for how many years consumers has been saying that we prefer sustainability, but it's not really, in the masses, it's not really seeing yet. So that's why we kind of identified also that if we can make their life easier, would they then, as you do, change their practices? And here, as you said, it's about structural, like a systemic change. So the change is needed in the whole ecosystems. Why? That is that makes it so difficult because, as one of you said, the whole linear supply chain of today is so efficient. So it's really difficult to compete with that time, and it's amazingly efficient. And companies has put a really lot of effort to make it that efficient. So it's a tough question.
Any questions here? I have a ton of questions. So,
Yeah, so we do have to pick our battles. So unfortunately, the easiest markets, at least supposedly easiest markets for us, is where the infrastructure is already in place, where the public transportation is serving the people already in a good manner, and then that means we can tap into the existing systems. If logistics are missing, we have a challenge. We've been asked to go and solve Mexico City. We've been asked to go and solve Istanbul, and we've had to say thank you, but we'll give it a few years. Jakarta was one of the examples as well. They've actually called us and they visited us. So we are there to become a platform that may help then the adoption of these new modes, but as I said, we don't operate them, so we can't solve all of the problems. So also the governments, municipalities, cities, etc. need to pitch in. Maybe we can be the platform. So one thing we can do is, and we tell cities that please do not go and create your own platform or your own system for mobility. Here's ours for free. That we don't even sell it to the cities. That would be one business model, but we don't do that. So we instead tell cities, allow Whim to be used by the consumers and encourage the transportation services to join Whim. In that way you save money, time, resources, and actually make the services more accessible to the citizens. So in Mexico City they have the minibuses, there's 150,000 of them. If we can put them on Whim, that would be a really efficient public transportation system already. Now we just hail them on the street. So we can bring efficiencies, but we can't solve it all. We have to pick the right markets first. Sorry for the long answer.
Yeah, very good. And I think that there's a very good example, specifically with African countries, that basically have leapfrogged some of the infrastructure development when it comes to banks, when it comes to traditional phone lines, basically by jumping directly to mobility services. And in many areas, basically many of the African countries are now having better mobility services, more advanced mobility services than some of the countries that have had these steps of physical banks and phone lines and so on. So I think there's very creative ways of using these platforms to really build something completely new without a lot of the luggage that we still have from going through these years of consumption, years of doing the things in the way we've been doing things.
So quickly, possessions and ownership is a declining trend. People don't show their prosperity, let's say in Finland and developed countries, so much about the car they own. They are after experiences. So we moved into the experience economy now. So they crave after experiences. So if we look at less than 25 or 18-year-olds who actually get a driver's license, it's on a decline. And this is a not well-known fact, but in the US, since the 80s, under 25-year-old people who buy a car has been on the decline since the 80s. They don't talk about that much. But people are not into buying cars that anymore or expressing their wealth and prosperity with possessions. They are more comfortable with showing that wealth and status in other ways, I suppose, by taking trips. On the health and safety issues, I don't know if you...
Yeah, there's a big differences between the nations, and Finland is among the most trustworthy nations in the world, and we have businesses in Mexico as well, and they're in the second-hand business. If I'm handing over your product, and it's very successful if you hadn't killed me or something, or so it's a big differences in this kind of things. So, but of course, we have some technologies how to identify the users and use it, and artificial intelligence is there as well, but I don't know what else to say. I'm a strong believer in the technology in this, but there are huge differences between the nations. We have roughly 6,000 cases in Finland every year that someone has tried to cheat. So it's 0.02% of all the second-hand transactions.
Yeah, that is true that technology is here the answer, and platforms, as you also are doing a lot of in there, because all of these different rating systems and so on, and that actually that I think it's an example from South Africa where Uber made that you can actually use Uber but not taxis because of the rating systems. I actually don't know if they haven't But in there, the one use is if it's 30 degrees, it's less than €1, and if it's 60 degrees, it is like €2.50. So it also might go that how often you actually need to wash, even that you have kids, because you can actually have a bigger washing machine and so on. But yeah, of course there is a line where it comes that you don't, that it's better to own your own washing machine. And here I think the problem in this case is that one washing machine could be actually used by more than just one family to actually be even more environmental friendly, and all of this whatever talopesula house washing machines are quite good example of that.
Grilling machine is a good example. 2/3 of the Finnish households have grilling machines, and I could ask question why. If you use that once a year, grill one hole to the wall.
You can also get it from a library.
Yeah,
nowadays,
these days,
so
and that's good. That's paving the way.
Yeah.
And that is actually one question that is talked a lot in circular economy, that do you actually need the drilling machine or the hole to the wall?
Exactly.
So that is actually kind of the idea also in this business, what actually I think you are also kind of answering to. Yeah, as actually my example of Bugaboo, it might not have that much environmental benefits, because anyway, I mean, it's an expensive pram, so you would probably, if you have it, you would resell it. So in a sense, and also that there has been a lot of research in these rebound effects, that do people actually consume more if there are certain kind of service models available. So it's not actually that simple answer, but the idea behind the service model is that then the manufacturer has an intention to make longer lasting products, and that quite often that one product is used more. The car is quite a good example in there, and then it's easier to remanufacture it if the manufacturer itself has or owns it and get it back to the manufacturer. So the answer is yes and no. The answer is it's more sustainable if you plan it to be more sustainable, but just because it's service, it's not more sustainable.
Perfect. Thank you.